It's rock and roll!
Welcome to the Look It's Rock and Roll podcast. I'm your host, Julian Gill. Today I'm joined by Ken.
Hello.
Lonnie.
What's up?
And Mark is on his phone due to technical difficulties, so we apologize in advance if his normal microphone is missing from this conversation. We're not missing Mark for this episode. Mark, good to see you.
Good to see you guys. It's been a while, but I'm glad to be back.
Yeah. All right, so today we are going to be talking about Def Leppard, High and Dry, or High and Dry, since they didn't spell it out completely. Their 1981 album, their first, recorded with producer Robert John Lang. My personal favorite album out of the catalog. Now, our good friends over at the Ages of Rock podcast did an episode celebrating the 40th anniversary of On Through the Night a couple of weeks ago, so I guess we're hopping on the Leopard bandwagon a little bit to talk about this one early, because anniversaries don't mean squat to us on this show. We talk about the albums that we want to talk about when we want to talk about them. But one of the interesting things that they raised about On Through the Night, I just wanted to kind of expand on a little bit, since I did write a book on the band, was On Through the Night was recorded with producer Tom Allen, and as they came out of the studio completing that, Judas Priest went in and recorded British Steel with them. Two very fantastic albums. Now, they raised the question of why Def Leppard is lumped in as a new wave of British heavy metal band, because On Through the Night was anything but Iron Maiden or Witchfind or Praying Mantis, or any of the other bands that you would really think about when you're talking about the new wave of British heavy metal. But High and Dry certainly is the one album where Def Leppard is heavy metal, in my opinion. So let's jump straight into this topic. The short and sweet general questions I'm going to throw to each one of you. Mark, let's start with you. Before you heard a note of Def Leppard, had you heard of them, and what had you heard about them as a band, and did it color your opinion?
I just heard mainly stuff from my sister, as usual, my older sister. And at the high school that she went to, it was very popular to have Def Leppard back patches on your jean jacket. A lot of her friends that hung around with her at that time had a lot of Pyromania back patches. That was a big album in our apartment building back in the mid-'80s. So I had learned about them through her, and from what I had heard, that they were this really cool band that had an extremely young drummer in it, that, you know, it might be something I might like. And I remember the first thing that I actually saw was the video for Rock of Ages. That was my first actual introduction to the band.
Nice. Lonnie, what about you?
I'm a little later to Def Leppard than you guys, I'm sure. My introduction to him was my brother bought Hysteria, which was, commercial success, and he, seeing them on MTV and, obviously Pour Some Sugar on Me and all the commercial success that they experienced with Hysteria. He has Hysteria on CD, and naturally, like what him and I, this is what him and I did, is that, well, you find a band you like, well, then when you go back and you get the back catalog. So so then the first CD I owned, my parents got me Pyromania for Christmas, and I was like, I don't know, 10, 11, something like that, like 5th grade, maybe something around in there. So, both, two very commercially successful albums for them. And it wasn't until, a few years later, that we, completed our back catalog of Def Leppard. So, and I bought Adrenalize, I think I bought Adrenalize like the day it came out. And I was, by that point by the time Adrenalize came out, I was, pretty into them. And, and knew their back catalog pretty good and was excited for Adrenalize the day it came out. Like I remember going to Best Buy, and buying it the day it came out. So, so my entry point's a little later than you guys, kind of like backtracking after my brother got Hysteria on CD when we were kids.
Very cool. I think we'll have to do an episode on Adrenalize down the road.
Oh, I agree. It's fun.
So my introduction was, I had a good friend, Michael, growing up who, was way into the Beatles. We'd go to flea markets and stuff like that. But he got into Pyromania and introduced me to them. So it wasn't any unique discovery. And then I bought High and Dry when it was reissued in 84 and immediately said, this is more like it, because the sonic difference between the two is substantial. So, MTV back in that era, you were still seeing, the videos on TV for the songs. Predominantly, I remember the remix. So, that was what it was. So from that day, thank you, Michael. All these years later, we shared the Beatles back then, and Def Leppard too. Ken, this was your pick. So why don't you tell us why it was your pick, and also, answer those questions.
Well, it's my pick because I think everyone should have this album. First of all, it's a great album. But how I got into them, or how I first heard of Def Leppard, was hearing this album. There used to be a radio station in the Bay Area that it was like it could have been a Friday night, Saturday night, I don't know, kind of show, but they would play full albums of a new, an artist. And for instance, I remember, I think taping Foreigner 4, for instance, off of this, because they played the full thing through before it was even out. It was like just before they would release it. So they, it was a new band. It was a new band, Def Leppard, and I was like, okay, I'll listen to this, And then I heard the first song, and it was like, bam, this is good, this is really good. I thought, so hey, this band sounds pretty darn good. And then the next song, so they play a side at a time, they keep going, and it was just like one after another. I was like, wow, another great one. And then the next song, another great one. It's like I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was like, oh God, this is going to keep going on. And then they go to the second side, a break, second side. I didn't even record it, at the time, because I didn't record everything, because I didn't even know this band. But yeah, after hearing that full album, I immediately went out the following, I think it was release day, or it was like a Tuesday or something, and I bought it. And I know I told my friend, I'm like, you gotta have to listen to this one. This is a good one. So he ended up getting it too, I believe. But yeah, that's how I got into them. I hadn't heard them on the radio. Other than that, that was brand new. They were brand new, just releasing it.
So is that answer to the question why you picked it? Because you think it's an album everyone ought to listen to? Definitely.
If you're into harder rock, classic kind of rock, and melodic, hard rock, definitely you should listen to this, because it's very, very, melodic, catchy, great riffs, stuff like that. So if you like hard rock, you'll definitely like this.
Yeah, without a doubt, it's heavy, 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 and it's guitar wars, and Mutt did a great job of capturing. It's the best sounding drums on a Leopard album.
It's a great, yeah.
Because there's only 2 albums that featured real drums, and that was the first 2 albums, because Pyromania did not have, legit, right. Rick Allen, and after that, of course, it wasn't quite the same, even though he did go back to a natural kit for slang. It was still enhanced to a certain degree, but the material is heavier pretty much than anything they've had throughout their career, at least consistently on an album. You have had heavy tracks on Euphoria. Mm-hmm. You have had heavy tracks on even Slang, for all the heat that it takes. But where does High and Dry fit into your personal Leopard tracks? Where do you rank it amongst the catalog of Leopard albums that you've purchased. I'm still buying Leopard albums when they come out. So, Ken, let's get back to you on that.
Yeah, well, this ranks number one for me. I know I had bought, for instance, Pyromania definitely after this album was out, and then they came out with Pyromania, and but the albums that follow, they kind of got more, not as raw, I guess, and not as heavy, a little bit more, slicker sound that they went for, and I preferred the more grittier crunch of guitars and riffs, though it's not too far off from what they did afterwards, but it's just a heavier album, and it's the go-to for me.
Nice. Just out of curiosity, what would be your number 2 album to contrast?
Pyromania
Okay.
would be my number 2. Yeah. After that, it's all downhill.
Oh, Mark.
I mean, yeah, that's another story, but yeah.
Well, for me, this album ranks number 2 for me. It's very, very good. The guitar playing on it is excellent. As a guitar player, instantly connected to it. My number 1 record, as I know you're going to ask it, is Hysteria. Hysteria was always a record that connected with me from the onset. It is a record, I think, that was produced really well, if you like that kind of production work. Every song on that album is a bona fide hit. I mean, side A, I think every song was released as a single. So it's a great record. The thing that I didn't like as much about High and Dry compared to Hysteria was that to me, it reminded me a lot of AC/DC. It sounded really AC/DC-ish in how they played, even the songwriting scene, very, down that alley. And there's nothing wrong with AC/DC. I love AC/DC too. But I thought that Hysteria sounded like a bona fide Def Leppard record. Like they came into their sound, I think, at that record. Whereas I think they were still searching for it in High and Dry. But High and Dry does have some killer songs. I mean, the first 3 songs on this record are like some of the best material that they've put on record for sure. I mean, I saw a fantastic video. I'm sure you guys must have seen it 1,000 times on YouTube when they played in Sheffield for the Adrenalize tour, and they played Another Hidden Run in that show. And I thought that, wow, that was, even with the more modernized equipment and sound that they had, Another Hit and Run came across as a really awesome live song. And I think that's one of the advantages this album has maybe over Hysteria, is that it's easier to replicate these songs and make them sound good live as opposed to Hysteria, which requires a lot of, production work. You need a good sound man, a guy who knows how to recreate those sounds for them live. It's a lot of work. Whereas this, they can just bring a bunch of marshals on stage and they'd be fine, right? So I think that it's it's high on my chart. Obviously, I still put it ahead of Pyromania, but it's still not. It's my number 2.
Yeah, it doesn't require sequencing, sampling, computers, and stuff to perform live, which is a key for it. It's my number 1, always has been. It's one of those albums that I will put on my guitar, turn it up, and just play along to every single song other than Bringing on the Heartbreak, which I refuse to play. The guitar is fun to play on this album. There's only 2 albums that I do this with, and it's this and British Steel. I will play back to front on just playing along, rhythm mostly. I can do some of the lead work off this album on Switch 625, and it is just my place of joy to be one with my guitar and an album, and one that I can actually do a half-assed job on guitar-wise, not being that adequate. So my number 2 is Hysteria, because it's just special to me. It's the craft on it is just sublime. Pyromania is good, but Hysteria is just blows it out of the water in every way. And I only try and play Run Riot off that one. I did try Gods of War once and forget about it. I'm just not good enough. Lonnie, what about you?
It ranks number 2 for me as well. I'm with Mark that it's behind Hysteria as my number 1, just mainly because that was my entry point into the band. And for a lot of people, your entry point into a certain band just sticks with you, and that is your favorite album. Ken, for Kiss, it's Rock and Roll Over. It's your entry point into the band. It's still your favorite Kiss album to this day. So, I think that holds true with a lot of people and a lot of the bands. There may be better albums than your entry point into them, but it's that timestamp of how you entered the band and why you got into the band is because of this album. Makes a lot of the time, almost all the time, makes it your favorite. But when going back and buying the back catalog and getting High and Dry, I was really surprised by how much heavier it was, and how much heavier Def Leppard was before Pyromania and before Hysteria. I was pleasantly surprised. I was like, oh wow, I was really looking for something in the vein of those two records. And then when you put it on and you hear the guitars and you hear the drums, you're like, oh wow, this is this is really good. This is better than I expected it to be, because I didn't know much about this album, and I didn't know much about On Through the Night. But getting this, I was pleasantly, really pleasantly surprised. So it's number 2 for me, just for those reasons.
Yeah, a couple of the other questions that I was going to ask about your entry points into Def Leppard and your initial impressions of the album, I guess we've kind of answered already in talking about it. So let's jump straight into overall things that you like and or dislike about High and Dry. Mark, let's start with you on that one.
Okay, let's get the thing so I sound half decent. Okay, so what I like, I love the guitar sounds. The guitar sounds on this album are very good. You can tell that Mr. Mutt Lange had been working with bands like AC/DC before this, because it very much shows in the sort of tone that they had for this record. I think Joe Elliott's vocals are marketably better on this record than it was on Through the Night. Obviously, I think that there was some kind of story going around that he had gotten vocal lessons that were sort of, brought to him by, I think Mutt actually recommended a vocalist as a teacher for him. And so his singing is just way better on this record than it was on Through the Night. Also, I think that as much as we kind of love to knock Rick Allen in years to come, I think that his drumming on this is really good and like ferocious drumming. You can tell that he's a young guy on this, and he's on fire. In the studio, he probably could do 1,000 takes and still have all the energy left to go do 1,000 more, probably by the sounds of it. And I think that on this record especially, I think Rick Allen is one of the black sheep underrated performers on this record. I think that without him on this record playing the way he did, it wouldn't have had as much balls to it, I think, than it does. Because the guitar and drums on this record are one. When they're synced together, you can't you can't hold those guys back when they're linked up. Rick Savage is a good bass player, but he's never been one of the guys that's been featured on a Def Leppard record. Vocally, yes, he's a good vocalist, obviously, but I think bass has never been an important factor of Def Leppard music. But the guitars and vocals, fantastic. Rick Allen underrated hugely on this record. What I don't like, nothing too much. I'll tell you one thing that some people might find kind of surprising. I was never big on the album cover on this album. I always thought that it was kind of a mild ripoff of Wish You Were Here. Because if you look at it, the whole diving man thing was something that was done for Wish You Were Here, and Hypnosis are the same people who did that cover that did this one too. And the whole thing with the people looking up, that's a very Pink Floyd image of those people looking up in the sky like that. So you can't help but think that there's a little bit of either Hypnosis were a little unsure what to do and decided to maybe just go into their vaults and say, let's just use some of this imagery, they won't mind. Or maybe they wanted something to tribute Floyd or something, who knows. But that's the only thing that I don't really like about this record. I think the album cover could have been a little bit better, I thought, for this record.
Okay, fair enough. And yeah, looking at that cover, why is there a dude diving in? You would have thought it would be a girl in a red bikini.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Get that movie out of your head. Ken, likes and dislikes of High and Dry.
Yeah. Well, I'll start off with I do agree about the album cover. I did read that it was Hypnosis had used that or wanted to use that imagery for Pink Floyd, and it was a reject basically, and that they thought, oh, High and Dry. Well, there's a guy up and whatever, this guy is falling in the water, he's up above the water, whatever, and they decide, oh, it's closest to that, that could maybe fit that, and they just used it. But yeah, I don't think it's a very good album cover for sure. Though Hypnosis had done a lot of good album covers, for other artists, like Mark said, Pink Floyd, and even the album we did earlier for The Sweet, Desolation Boulevard, they did that one. So they've done a lot of good stuff, but this one was a reject that they just they just allowed them to use. I don't want to see a guy in a Speedo, on the cover of the album.
You spend hours staring at that album.
Yeah, I don't want to. Yeah, usually you like to stare at album covers, but in that case, no, I wasn't staring at that. I was like, what the hell is this? But anyway, as far as the music, I agree with Mark also about the guitar sound. The whole sound production is great, and I think the way the guitars work off of each other, is a big plus that you lose later on down the road on future albums. They just had this chemistry, back when they were doing these earlier albums. The other thing is the drums. I think a good thing, and I noticed this when I was listening, that I didn't pay much attention to the drums. It's like sometimes a good drummer is like, you don't even know he's there. He's doing a great job, but you don't know. It's nothing like standing out. He's not trying to overdo things in the music and so on. It's just a great backbone to the rhythm of everything. So yeah, those I pretty much agree everything with Mark on that. Otherwise, it's just the good the material, just the material that they put on this record is all great. So
the voice of reason has spoken. Lonnie.
No, I mean, I was really surprised with the production as well. Just to echo what you guys were saying, like as I said in my opening statement about it, that I really thought of Def Leppard being a softer band almost from what I had with Pyromania and with Hysteria. Not that those are soft rock records, but they're not grungy guitar driven, riff driven type of records. So
Yeah.
I was very surprised by that, and that's what I like about this album, that it is guitar driven. It is Phil Elliott sounds really, really good. And Phil Elliott, what the fuck? Joe Elliott sounds. my credibility's thrown out. Joe Elliott sounds really good on this record. His vocals are much different. I mean, he just sounds almost like a different singer almost on this record than by the time you get to Hysteria. For a young kid, it almost made me have to go and double check. Like, well, did they have a different vocalist early on? Because he does sound very different by the time they get there, and it's not different in a bad way, but just different. But the guitars and the production on this album is what really struck me, and it still strikes me to listen to, because it was not what I was, as I said, it was not what I was expecting when I put this album on for the first time. And and we'll get into the remixes later too, but I mean, I like it. I really like it start to finish, and I like how it still surprises me to this day when I put it on, because when I think of Def Leppard, I always think one thing, and when I put this album on, it's something different, not completely different, but just different than the Def Leppard that I hear on the radio and the Def Leppard that had commercial success. So it always surprises me to this day. That's one thing I always like about this album.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you all touched on that I agree with, that I like the most about this album, is the sound. And that sound comes down to the producer. because I think there's equally strong material on the debut, It Could Be You, Wasted, Rocks Off, that if they sounded sonically like these songs, they would have been equally as powerful. But instead, the production takes away from the power of the music that was already present in this band. Joe Elliott has also laughingly said that it was lucky that he learned how to sing, by the time they made it. And this was an album where, he's a screamer at this point. The first 3 albums, he's a screamer. Yeah. He's not a singer. Hysteria on, he has learned how to sing. Right now, he's more of I always think of the lead singer from Crocus, Mark Storis, as being kind of a screamer, or Udo Dirkenschneider.
Yes.
Those guys, they could scream, sing, and that's what Joe's doing, and I love it. But the thing I love the most about this album is the guitars, and it is the interplay that died with Steve and also with Pete leaving. That those two were two guitarists that knew exactly where they fit. Without one, it became Phil's band guitar-wise, with everything being relegated that he didn't want to do. You just do the rhythm, Viv. I'm going to bumblebee everything else. It's all me. There's no room for another guitarist. Here you had Pete doing what he's good at. You have Steve naturally gravitating to what he's good at, and Mutt making it all sound great. And I think the interesting comment made, about the lack of bass. It's just not something I can even I can't think of a memorable bass line from this album. What do I not like? I don't have a problem with the cover. Red Speedo and all. My dislike comes back to when I became a fan of it, and that was going in and buying this album, and it had these poxy freaking remixes on it. Yeah. That is what I don't like about High and Dry. I do not like any version of the album that has those 2 abominations tacked onto it. And that's it.
I forgot to mention that I didn't like the cover, but I think
the remix
kind of went without saying. That's all comment as you guys were going.
Yeah, I think the cover is the issue. All right, let's get into favorites. And why don't we start with Mark and your 3 favorites to discuss?
Well, and I think I said it before. I think the opening 3 tracks on this album are the standout songs. I mean, sure, there are other songs on here that are fantastic. I mean, You Got Me Running is really good. I've always loved that song. What a great way to start off side 2 on a record, especially that little little guitar thing that he does underneath the opening riff is really cool. But, Let It Go. What a great opening song, and it's very AC/DC-ish, that whole opening riff. But I've always loved that, and the great way to end with that big, drum fill thing at the end. It's just a good opener all around. Another hit and run, I think, is the Surprise song when I first heard it, because I was like, wow, this song is as good, if not better, than the opening track, in my opinion. And it was one of the songs that when I discovered or heard that Rick Allen had gotten into his car accident and lost the arm, I was thinking there was no way they're ever going to play this song again, because he does so much fast hi-hat work on that song. There's no way you can do that in one hand, but obviously they modified it around his new way of drumming. But I've always loved that. And then, Saturday Night High and Dry, that's another total tip of the hat to AC/DC. And you know what? I'm not surprised about that, because, like I said, Mutt just came off of arguably the 2 biggest AC/DC albums ever, Back in Black and For Those About to Rock, So it's in his blood at that point. And to have those kind of tones fresh in his mind, it's right there. So for me, the whole album, I think, is good. Side 2, I mean, some of the songs near the end of the record, I'm not as much into. Mirror, Mirror is okay, and No, No, No is not too bad either. But I think side A is just stellar, beginning to end. I mean, even Switch 2-5 is a pretty cool instrumental from a band that you would never probably expect to hear an instrumental song from, So, but I think the first 3 songs are the real gems, in my opinion.
Nice, good picks, and I don't think there's possible to have a bad pick from this album. Lonnie, what about you? What are your favorite three from the album?
I'm going to echo Mark with "Let It Go." It's a great opening track for an album. It's a great opening track when they play live. They still open with it a lot to this day. And I always like when they open with it live because all the girls waiting to hear something off of Hysteria are kind of standing there looking at each other like, what is this? Is this new? So Let It Go is a great opening song, and it's a good, you know, it's just a good song. It's just a great opening song for anything. It's a good, get you fired up a little bit just listening to it. So I have to echo him with that. And I like "You Got Me Running." Just a fun song. It's fun for me to listen to because I have playlists and that. Then when I do run, as corny as that sounds, it's a good song to run too. And I have to go with "High and Dry" Saturday Night because it's like a, it's almost like an anthem type song to me. So and I hear the AC/DC tones in it as Mark was saying, but to me it sounds like almost like an anthem type of song for Def Leppard, and I enjoy that, and it's super catchy, which I enjoy too. And a lot of songs on this album are catchy, but those three for me: "Let It Go," "High and Dry" Saturday Night, and "You Got Me Running," my three favorite. But like you said, it's hard to pick three favorite off an album that when you like every song. So I mean, you ask me tomorrow, my picks may be totally different.
That's how it goes with anything when we talk music. So, Ken, how about you? What are your three?
Yeah, it's, again, like you guys said, it's hard to pick a few songs. They're all pretty darn good. But I definitely agree with "Let It Go." It's just the perfect kickoff to the album. Just a, great rocker. It's like that's what got me started. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was like, this is so good. I didn't think they were gonna be able to follow it up with anything else, but then they did. You have another hit and run. It's like, okay, So those two songs definitely are two of the songs that are my favorite. The third one was hard. I almost picked "Bring On the Heartbreak," but I've heard it so many times. It's like one of those ones that I can't really do that. But "Bring On the Heartbreak" to me always has to have the switch, 625 with it, because that's why I heard it. I always thought of it as one song because as it goes out, that bass, and this is the only bass you really hear, stands out as the little bass. It goes between the songs. It keeps going, dun, dun, and it kicks into the instrumental. And it was like I always thought it was like it's an ending to "Bring On Heartbreak." I thought it meant to be it's meant to be that way, but I guess it wasn't. But it worked out that way. So when it was on, I heard on the radio. Sometimes they would play it with that right behind it, and sometimes they wouldn't. I was like, oh, why did they drop that? It's like, why didn't they play that? It's 625. So I'd be, oh well, But the third song really is, and it was a hard choice, but "Lady Strange." I thought it was a great little different song, great riff that runs throughout the song. That dun 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 dun, and it's just a cool song. So for now, those are the three songs that are my favorites.
Yeah, the first, it's easy to pick too. The third one's the tough one to pick. "Let It Go." Obviously, lead off track, it'll be up there. If we ever do a ranking of lead off tracks off albums, it'll be on my list without a doubt. And again, because I love playing it, it was a single. And all that. So it's really like a guitar explosion of intent and the perfect way to open an album. Second up is Switch 625 again, because of just my personal pleasure playing it. I'm playing along to it and learning, some of those lead parts. It just is exquisite, but I totally agree with you, Ken. it's got to go with Bringing on the Heartbreak. They're symbiotic. I get
Absolutely.
really, really mad and shake my fist at the radio if they play
Right.
Bringing on the Heartbreak and don't play. I feel, it's not a happy ending. It's like they go on to something else. It's like,
Yeah,
come
yeah,
on, you can't leave me hanging like that,
yeah, yeah.
So that one, definitely. I think for my third pick, I could go with High and Dry, but I'm gonna go with On Through the Night. I think it's just it's a little bit of a change of pace on this album, that song.
Mm-hmm.
And I always loved how quirky it was to call a song on your album the title track to the previous album, which didn't have a title track. I like that sort of
Right. Yeah.
weirdness. But overall, it's just a change in pace and a different vibe, and it's quite mature for them. A lot of these songs, dated from early 1980. Before they'd even gone on tour to the States for On Through the Night, they'd already debuted Let It Go in its original form. When the Rain Falls, I think it's on that box that came out, a year ago or so. Lady Strange was played all through that U.S. tour in 1980. And what was the third one? Oh, Medicine Man, which didn't go anywhere. Well, really. So those are my three picks. Now, let's see. Can you do your three least favorite tracks off the album, Mark?
Yeah. And again, they're not really my least favorite because they're bad songs. It's just, in a record full of great stuff, you have to pick something that's your least favorite. Number one for me, Bringing on the Heartbreak. I mean, it's a great song as far as being a ballad, but really when I was, excuse me, when I was listening to this record when I was younger, it was always the song that I kind of fast forwarded past because I wasn't really into it as much as the other songs. And really it was just the last two, Mirror Mirror and No No No, are the ones that I just didn't really have as much of a connection to. I mean, I would never skip those songs. Like, I'd always listen to side B all the way through. And if I ever fast forwarded anything, and always just be Bringing on the Heartbreak, because they played that a lot here. I don't know how it was over there for you guys, but over here in Canada, they played that a lot. And they'd especially play the remix version that had more of the synths with it and the more smoothened out lead sounds, which I'm sure we'll get to in a bit. But they always seem to play that one, and that kind of, I guess tainted my like of that song. So I'd say Bringing on the Heartbreak, Mirror Mirror, and No 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 are my ones I don't like from the record.
Okay, Ken.
Yeah. You can't really pick one. So I'm just gonna say the last three songs. I mean, no, they're all good. They're still good. I mean, On Through the Night, like you said, Julian, it's a change. It's a great song, but it's probably the only song that doesn't maybe really fit with a lot of the other songs on there. It's the only one, but it's still a great song. And what is it? Mirror Mirror, which is good. It's a good song. So I'm picking three that it doesn't mean they're no good. It means they're good. No No No. The thing about No No No, and you probably know this, Julian, that at the end of the vinyl version of the early vinyl pressings, the No 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 just kept going. Well, on mine, and I was playing mine, it goes No 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 for 48 times. 48 times he says no no no. It's like in a run out, it just keeps going no 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 48 times. Where on the remaster version I have, it's like I think 16. But it was intentional back then, but and then it's one with 16, it just fades out. But anyway, that's just a little tidbit about that.
Two bands have annoyed me with those infernal outros. Def Leppard with this one, and Vinnie Vincent Invasion.
Let's say it's the Invasion.
Yes. Two incredibly annoying things. Lonnie, what would be your least favorites? And again, we do like to clarify. It's not we don't like the songs. We're having to pick ones that we like less than the others.
Yeah.
Correct. Julian told us we had to pick three least favorites, so these are my three. If I have to pick, out of 10, 8, 9, and 10, it's these songs. So I'm going to echo what Mark said, actually, exactly what Mark said with Bringing on the Heartbreak, Mirror, Mirror, and No, No, No. So if we were ranking our songs, obviously Mirror, Mirror, No, No, No would be way down there because none of us are giving them rave reviews. So Bringing on the Heartbreak to me is just another power ballad, and there's so many of them. To me, it's just almost like white noise with another power ballad release, and every band was doing it at the time, and on through the 80s, every band was doing it. And Def Leppard really got into power ballads as time went on, but that's another episode. So between that one, it just doesn't move the needle for me. And then Mirror, Mirror, No, No, No. They're just two of the weaker songs on the album. Not that they're bad songs. Again, like you guys were saying, they just, when I have to put them up against Let It Go, Another Hit and Run, High and Dry, Saturday Night, You Got Me Running, somebody's got to come in. Somebody's got to come in at the end. And unfortunately, it's these two songs. If I put them up against other songs, they'll probably rank a whole lot more favorably. But given the competition, that's just how it falls.
All right, Lonnie, what would you rather listen to? Bringing on the Heartbreak or Love Bites?
That's good. I'd go Bringing on the Heartbreak over Love Bites. What about you guys?
Yeah, I would.
What about you?
Whoa, what was that?
That was Ken's vacuum cleaner.
Oh.
All right, so what are my least favorite? I've already kind of alluded to one, and no, strictly because it just does seem to be gratuitous screaming. It doesn't really have anything else. And what I've noticed on all my picks were all Steve Clark. Predominantly in terms of guitars or in terms of songwriting, so I'm actually quite chuffed with that. Do I have another one? I'm going to say Bringing on the Heartbreak, but I'm going to clarify that by saying it's the remix version.
That's cheating.
It's the Abomination. Because that was the one I predominantly heard. You didn't hear the remix, the original version so much, or the original B-side, which was Me and My Wine, which they then came out with an extra video for just because they could, after Pyromania hit. So it does, when I became a fan, very much colors my opinion. Like, I bought the cassette and it had the 12 songs. So to me, High and Dry has always been the version that had Me and My Wine and the remix of Bringing on the Heartbreak, and it's just impossible to separate it with the album that had been available for a couple of years prior to that, because I wasn't a fan at that point. So, no, Bringing on the Heartbreak, the remix, and that's it. I can't come up with a third. I won't put any of those songs as a least favorite because my guitar tells me that I play them too often for them to ever be put in such a basket. Let's talk about some of the singles. First single released off the album was Let It Go. I don't have the British ones anymore. They're in an attic in Scotland, unfortunately. And it was backed with Switch 625. The promo version came as a long and a short version of Let It Go. Just boggles the mind how much they'll chop out to make it 3 minutes friendly. What are your kind of thoughts on that? I think we're probably going to come back to the same thing we said about it being a great first track off the album. But Mark, as a musician, what's your critical analysis of Let It Go being released as the first single from the album?
I think it's a great selection. Your first single should be the song that represents the album in terms of what you're going to expect to hear as far as the rest of the record goes, I think. And if people heard that and said, okay, well, the rest of the record is going to be hard rock and guitar driven, sort of, AC/DC influenced rock, they wouldn't be wrong listening to it, because the rest of the record is pretty much, an offshoot of that single. And I think it's a great single. It's a, perfect length, I think, for a single. It might be a little long, but, still, I think it's a perfect sort of first single. And I think that it represented the album well. That's one of the things I think people sometimes make the mistake of, because sometimes they take a song that's really different, and and if it does well for them, then the rest of the album is kind of shot, because now everyone is expecting the rest of the record to be kind of similar in sound to that, and then if it's not, then you're really buying an album for one song. This way, when you have an album like a single like this, you buy the whole record and you're not disappointed, because the whole record is just as good as that first single. I think that the whole record is fantastic. So I think that as a first single, they could have did this one. They could have did High and Dry even as a single too. But I think as a first single, this is perfect, I think.
Okay, before I go to Ken and Lonnie on that, I do want to kind of go into the second single with you. Do you think it would have been braver for them to have released Bringing On the Heartbreak as the first single?
It would have been braver, but I think it would have been a mistake, because I think that people would have immediately kind of suspected, okay, I know what record this is going to be like. It's going to be very, geared towards the softer end of things, a little bit more, there might be a bit more ballads, because usually when you start off, your first single should be, the hard-hitting stamp of the record. If you come out with a kind of a ballady release, you could be mistaken to think this is going to be something down the road of like a very, very commercial heart record or something, something that you're not expecting. But you'll make no mistake when you hear, Let It Go, to know what you're going to expect when you put out a single like, Bringing On a Heartbreak. While there's some great guitar playing and stuff like that in there, it doesn't give it the same oomph as the other song does. That's for sure.
You said Heart. We should do a show on Baby Lestrange and Passion Works. Lonnie, what's your thought on Let It Go as the lead-off single, and would you have chosen something else?
No, I would have chosen Let It Go as the lead single, because like Mark said, your lead single usually does represent what you're trying to convey in this album. And Let It Go is a perfect representation of this album. It's hard hitting, it's guitar driven, it's the signature song off the record. So I think going with anything else would have been a mistake. That plain and simple. I mean, it's the snapshot of the record, and it's exactly what a lead single should be. And Def Leppard follows the. And I think if you would have went with Bringing On the Heartbreak as a lead single, Def Leppard follows the formula. You have to go hard rock song, power ballad, and then back with another hard rock song. That was the formula for a very long time for almost all 80s bands. You don't start with the ballad. You start with one of the first couple tracks on the album that's hard hitting. And while Bringing On the Heartbreak has the most commercial success out of any song on this record, it was still the right choice to make it the second single off the album, because it's not a good representation of what the album is. And we'll say what you want about the song. Bringing On the Heartbreak's a fine song, but I don't agree. It shouldn't, even though it has the most commercial success, you should Let It Go was definitely the right choice.
You know what though? Just let me just say one thing really quickly. I was told when I was doing my co-op at the recording studio, they always told me that the reason why you do the hard rock in first and the ballad second, apparently there's some big logic to this. You got to scoop the guys first with the hard rocking song, and then you always come back with the ballad, because now you want to bring in the women now to start buying the album, right? That I was always told that that's the way you should approach it, because you want to have both groups of buyers in on the record. And what's the best way to do that? Give a song for the guys and give a song geared more toward the girls, right? I don't know many guys who said, "Oh, I simply had to buy High and Dry for Bringing On the Heartbreak." I know a lot of girls, including my sisters, said that they really liked that song and they bought it because of that, right? So I think that theory could hold some water.
Well, I think that holds water too, in the fact that if you release the ballad first, guys are more likely to blow it off the album or blow off the band, saying, that's garbage, I'm not buying that. And then you release a hard hitting song as your second single. You're like, yeah, whatever. That's probably like the only hard song on the album. So so to your point, yeah, I totally see that being the case. You don't want to lose the guy audience right off the jump.
Yeah.
Sexist.
Yeah. I have to agree with that to a degree. Yeah, I think it has to do with also the buying public. I think mostly males were buying most of the records, more records than women were, at least in the rock and roll genre, or even the hard rock. I think that's part of the reason. But yeah, I do agree with, um, the hard rock song, and then the mellower later. That's fine. Though on this song, you would never hear it on AM radio. I mean, this is a single for FM kind of release.
Yeah.
This would never play AM radio. Now, Bring On the Heartbreak could have potentially become an AM single or hit or whatever, if it was first. But yeah, I can't see them releasing that first, even though it is a good song. Um, Other bands have done it. I talked about Foreigner before. They did Urgent first, and then like Waiting for a Girl Like You, second kind of thing, and then came back with their harder, rocking song. So yeah, it's the kind of the formula.
We've kind of talked about Bringing On the Heartbreak already. So, Me and My Wine, originally a B-side on that single, later added to the album. Should it always have been on the album in your view? They had performed that at Reading in the 80s. So, I mean, should it be there? Or is it one of those ones that should have waited for the box set? Ken, I'll start back with you on that.
Yeah, I think it should. To me, it doesn't fit in with the other songs on I Enjoy. Maybe that's the way I used it. But when I listen to it, it seems, something about it seems to me unfinished. And I think that's why it was a B side. And yeah, I know we talked about Bringing On the Heartbreak, but yeah, and I'm gonna do a different kind of wine, which is that the synthesizer stuff was just an abomination or whatever. Putting that the sound of that made me think of the keyboard or synthesizer in Elton John's Funeral for a Friend. Just the sound. I was like, why are they putting that in here? It ruined the song after. And this is after I was listening to the music for a couple years before they decided to remix it or whatever. But yeah, Julian, I said Me and My Wine it doesn't fit in. It just doesn't fit in with the other stuff, and I think it's unfinished.
Lonnie.
Yeah, I mean, I can see why Me and My Wine doesn't fit in as well. It should have been saved for a box set. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think there's other side. I think there's others, great songs on the album that you could have put "You Got Me Running" as a B-side. I don't think Me and My Wine. It's fine, but it's more of a box set for a collector's type deal. I think there's other great songs on the record itself that deserve a B-side release as opposed to that.
Okay, Mark.
Well, I think that it should have been put on the record. I think that it was a good idea that they put it on later on the reissues, because if you're going to commit money to a video, I mean, even though it was a really cheesy kind of video done in a living room of a house, and if you watch it really closely, there's a great part in there where Steve Clark kind of slips off the edge of a table and hits himself against the wall. It's really quick. You could almost miss it if you don't pay attention. But he does a nice header into the wall in the video. But yeah, I mean, if you're going to commit money to a video, put the song on the album. I mean, you're promoting a song that's not on a record. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me. You know what I mean? So, if you have a video, it should be on the record. That doesn't make any sense to me for it not to be on the album. But, this was the point where Mutt had started discovering, the Fairlight and all these kind of sampling equipment, and while he established a pretty cool sounding kick drum and snares sound, those toms that he came up with were just atrocious on those remixes. And even on Pyromania, those tom sounds are just, oof. I don't know what he was thinking, but the kick drum was pretty hefty, and the snare drum was okay. But I know what he was trying to do. He was trying to make stuff that would just come through the stereo speakers when it's played on the radio, and people going, "Wow, what the hell is that?" And I think the problem was people were saying, "Wow, what the hell is that?" but not in the right way. Because especially when you started adding in all those kind of keyboards, those little sequencer parts, like in bringing on the Heartbreak. I just think that Def Leppard fans weren't ready for that. By the time Hysteria came around, I think they were ready. They knew the writing was on the wall at that point and knew what was going to come at that point.
Yeah, so I totally get it in the way that bringing on the Heartbreak had set up the band for the success that was realized with Pyromania, because the album was on the charts and it had primed them. They needed a release, and and High and Dry comes out. Pyromania comes out, and zoom, off they go. Then they realize, well, we've had all these, sales, but we've never really had a massive single. Let's do the Pyromania treatment to bringing on the Heartbreak, and and release that. So, and let's throw Me and My Wine on there again, because that was on there in the first place. And a lot of people didn't buy it. So I kind of get it from that perspective. I understand why they would, want to fill the gap in '84 as well, by giving it that treatment and trying to give it a second chance, a second life after the booster it had provided for the fame. And yet the album, never really went to the similar level that Pyromania did. I mean, it'll always be left down, at the beginning of their catalog, and I think it's a double platinum or something, so certainly nowhere near. So I don't know how much I want to bash on this stuff, because it does make sense. I do want to ask you, before we wrap up, about a third single. A third single from this album was only released in Australia, and that was High and Dry, Saturday Night, Backed with On Through the Night. And it is actually one of the most expensive singles to actually find a copy of, other than the EP. What do you think about that as a third single? And do you think there should have been a third single? And if you don't think that was a good one, what would have been your picks for the third one? I really just executed a very confusing paragraph. Lonnie?
I'm going to have a boring answer. I think it's the absolute right pick for a third single, because you go back to a harder track with that album, with the third single. It's one of my favorite songs off the record, and it's definitely what I would have picked for the third single. And I think it should have been released in the U.S. or the UK for that matter, and possibly brought the band some more early success. So I think it has potential that it could have done well on radio. So I think it's the absolute right pick, and I wish it would have had more of an international release.
Australians are pretty smart, aren't they? Good picks, yeah. Aussies. Mark, your thoughts on that?
Okay, well, I think that it's not a bad selection. I personally would have probably picked You Got Me Running as the third single. I think it has a good combination of hard rockiness, but it has a bit more melodic sense to it, almost like if you're trying to corral both sides of the buying market, something that the guys will like, and something with a little bit more melody that the girls might think is kind of cool as well. I mean, I'm kind of approaching it from the viewpoint of an A&R kind of guy.
That's according to ESPN's and said sources. For all the last run line, FoxSportsRadio.com.
Meanwhile, the news.
Breaking news. The Bengals still. Lonnie's like, turn it off.
Damn it.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that it was a good single, but I would have went with You Got Me Running. And the thing that's funny though is I don't think at this point it would have mattered what the hell they released as a single, because an interesting point that I remember reading about Def Leppard history, and correct me if I'm wrong, Julian, is that even when they released Pyromania, they had released Pyromania and sold 6 million copies, and from what I remember reading is that 6 million copies pretty much all in the United States. They were playing huge arenas in America, And when they went back to England, they were playing still small halls. They couldn't sell out anything in England because they were nobody was buying it from them. So I don't know if it's because the British public kind of looked at Def Leppard and were hoping that they would be the next Queen, and ended up being more AC/DC-ish, and they were like, no, I'm not liking this, and they didn't click until like Hysteria with them. But I mean, well, I was always being kind of curious about that. Why do you think they didn't click in with the British audience, their hometown people, until much later?
I don't know. You have to remember, it's a very British thing to love people to be successful and then to knock them down a level because they rise above their station too fast and too quickly. So these were very young lads who, came from the industrial north. They've still got the accents from up north. And I don't know. I don't know why. Because, again, they were playing the same sort of gritty rock that Iron Maiden was doing in the era, that Judas Priest was doing in the era, that a plethora of bands were doing. So I just don't understand why Britain never got on the bandwagon. And even early on, during the Hysteria era, it wasn't a sure thing for Britain either. The first singles came out there, and they weren't touring massive places again. So, yeah, I really don't know. Let's wrap up with just, final thoughts on, we've covered, the first album that they worked with Mutt.
Hey, I didn't get in on that.
Did I ignore you, Ken?
You ignored me.
Please forgive me. Ken, would you please grace us with your thoughts on the third single?
Real quickly. The third single, yeah, I would have agreed with High and Dry. It was a great kind of party song, and back in the day, there's a lot of parties and stuff going on, more so with booze and whatnot at that time period. So I think it could have done well had it been released. And now quickly on the other thing about why they didn't, they weren't so popular in the beginning in England versus here. It happens kind of reverse sometimes, where England, like for instance, they like Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Their first album was, did really well there in England, and it did not here in the United States. So it picked up kind of like an opposite thing. It happens sometimes. I don't know why, but like Julian said, I'm not sure, but it seems to happen. So, okay, now continue.
Now to wrap up and to bring to conclusion our investigation into High and Dry. If an enhanced edition solely focused on this album was done, what format and bits and pieces would you like to be included in it? And Ken, I'll start with you because I was so rude to you a moment ago.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't mind an enhanced version with extra tracks. If they have some demo version of songs, you can see how maybe how Mutt Lange, reworked songs for them or helped produce them in a certain way to make them sound the way they are. Some video. If there is some live concert footage. I don't think they have the live concert footage. I saw them on that tour. I mean, they opened for Blackfoot on that tour, and I saw them, and that was such a great show. I couldn't, I was like, wow, this great. But that would have been cool. Videos or even live audio. And anything else, I don't know what else they could dig up, but if there are demos, like I said, it'd be cool or outtakes of other songs that just didn't make the list of songs that made it to the album.
Yeah, I totally agree. And also work in progress. I think there's an alternate mix version of Switch 625.
Right.
Would love the demos that they would have recorded earlier in the year. Would love a full soundboard from, the tour. They toured with Rainbow. They toured with Blackfoot. They toured with who else? Ozzy, I think. Ozzy.
Yeah.
I know Joe Perry Project did one show with them. So I would really like the full Monty. I would even accept the remix, and that being honest.
Sure.
I would think there's a fair amount of stuff. Video-wise, I'm not so sure. I think they played in Largo, but would they have, recorded a opening act, and would the opening act have that stuff? So that'd be interesting. Mark, what about you?
Well, I think Ken pretty much covered a lot of it. If there's any demos, those are always interesting to have, whether it's on CD or if it's on vinyl, like a couple of 7-inch releases on there. If you're going to make like a box set release, obviously put it back out on vinyl, of course. But the audio is something I always find very interesting. When I was younger, a couple of my friends and I used to frequent going downtown to Toronto, go to various head shops and look for, bootleg, illegal copies of things. And there was usually a lot of Def Leppard live stuff. Some of them were audience recordings, some of them were soundboard stuff. Very rarely soundboard, but there was a lot of audience recording things. And I remember my friend got a copy of something called Def Leppard Live on Stage, and had a picture of Joe Elliott with his, the British flag T-shirt on, and him playing a Les Paul, and on the cover of this release, and it had them doing mainly High and Dry stuff, and debuting a couple of Def Leppard songs. I think Photograph was one of them that they were playing at that club thing. And I remember when we were listening to it, just looking at each other, say, wow, these guys are absolutely terrible singers live. They were horrendous. Like their harmonies, it was like Barney Gumble and two other drunk guys singing. It was like really bad. Like I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It made me really start, suspecting things when I started seeing them, on video and stuff like that live, and they were doing these perfect harmonies live. I was like, wait a minute, I'm getting the feeling there's something fishy's going on here. So, I think that's why bands like Def Leppard might be a little reluctant to put out really raw recordings of stuff from themselves in the early days, because there probably isn't too many good things. I mean, maybe if you're lucky with like a King Biscuit Flower Hour recording where there's an actual good recording done with, to a remote, live truck that could do some proper recording of them, maybe that would be decent, right? But I think that it's just a matter of, do they have anything in the vaults that they're not going to cringe when they listen to when they put it out? But later on, I think they could get away with a lot more stuff than they could with this album. I think you'd be pretty limited, I think. But, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I think we're pretty limited. That 1980 live show that was recorded and released only recently, was pretty much the gem that I know about in the catalog. I think they probably do have something from 81, but, again, is the quality there? Lonnie?
Yeah, I wonder what is available that they could put out to do, a proper enhanced edition. Def Leppard has really put out some really, really nice deluxe editions in recent years, but I wonder what's available for them to do, or what they have available at their disposal to do something like this. I would like to hear some demos of how some of these tracks came together. Obviously, like Ken said, I'd like to hear, what kind of live, what kind of live shows are available, if any. It seems that it's pretty dry from what is out there. So, I'd like to see it. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but I'd like to see what if anything they could put together. Is there any video they could put together? Is there anything we don't know about that they could throw out there to really surprise us? And at this point, I really don't know if it's there, because I think they would have already have given us something, like at least a taste of it at this point, because they have been. Def Leppard is a whole lot better than other bands of putting things out there for the fans and giving them, these outtakes and these demos and these rarities that they want. So I don't know, what's available, but maybe they can surprise us.
Nice. Well, I guess that's a nice way to end. And if you like this show, subscribe, share, comment. We'd love to hear from everyone. But for now, from Mark, from Ken, Lonnie, and myself, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. Thank you for watching or listening to this episode. Be sure to subscribe to us, like us, or even leave us a review. You can find us and join the conversation on Facebook.